everybody. Welcome back to the Nonprofits. So we actually have some good secular news on the show. Yay! So Rob, please tell us what is going on in Congressional Congress.
Yeah. Did you know there is a Congressional Freethought Caucus within the House of Representatives? Because I didn't. Good to learn. Still, the CFC, have added 2 new members this month. They are the Representatives Judy and Delia Ramirez. They are both Democrats. The CFC is a group of representatives that support, as they say, quote, reason-based policy. They advocate for data-driven decisions, and they oppose the much larger Congressional Prayer Caucus, which is comprised of both Republicans and Democrats. The Freethought Caucus has 28 members and is made of only Democrats. Luckily, their membership has only gone up since they were founded in 2018. Also, fun side fact, they staunchly opposed the new justice, Kevin Branagh. No.
What's his name?
I'll look it back up. Yeah, that's okay. I'll look it back up. But yeah, so that's what they're for. They're there for reason-based policy. They are climate change. They understand that that's happening. They oppose, or they support separation of church and state.
So we want to point out that this article is from our The Friendly Atheist by Hemant Mehta, posted on May 12, 2025. Thank you, Hemant. That contributes a lot to the things that we talk about on this show.
Yes,
so Rob.
Yes, of course.
Are there any members that are actually like openly atheists, or are they kind of like operating under like I'm a free thinker umbrella over here?
So I did actually try to look that up, but I didn't find any. However, most of the verbiage that I find whenever I look up this caucus is most of them are religious, which seems to imply that some of them are at least atheists, but I cannot specifically find out who. They probably don't want to be known, or at least have that super public. But it seems to be that there are at least some atheists. However, most of them are religious.
Well, it's one of those things. They become out an atheist and you're in government. It's pretty much like political suicide, you know?
Yeah.
Which, especially in the current climate, definitely.
Yeah, like Chu, for example, is a Unitarian Universalist, which is about as non-religious as you can get generally.
As you can get, yeah.
I love those places where they're just all about like, hey, be nice, and why? Because
I don't.
I've been to a Universalist. I've been to a Unitarian Universalist service. I was too early on a Sunday for me, and I'm lazy. I like to sleep. But it was a very positive, kind of like groovy message. So, I'm not gonna poo-poo on it.
Hemant says that
Tracy, I don't have something cool to say to you. I don't get the buh.
Just have a name.
So anyway, that being said, do you think those of us that belong to like secular organizations, should push more openly for candidates to join, even if the risks blow back in some? I know that I said that, identify yourself as an atheist is political suicide, but maybe would it be a good thing for people to be more out about their atheism?
Almost certainly. I think we should be pushing for more membership to the Freethought Caucus, or to the is that what they call it? Is that what it's called? Yeah, Freethought Caucus. I think that we should push for more membership there, and I don't think necessarily that push like. I'm kind of in a difficult position here because it's ultimately a personal decision whether or not to identify oneself as an atheist. Same thing with identify. Well, if you are a Christian, it is not your personal decision. You must identify yourself as a Christian, if you're going to be in line with your Bible. It's one of those things. If they want to identify themselves that way, that is their personal choice. I'm more interested in this Freethought Caucus. I'm glad that we have theistic members. It's primarily religious, because that's going to see, like Hemant Mehta mentions in the Friendly Atheist article here, that it's not an atheist club. You know what I'm saying? If it turned into even something reminiscent of an atheist club, I think that would be a problem, which would discourage further membership. Yeah, that's my whole thing there.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Well, first of all, by the way, I looked it up and remembered it was Brett Kavanaugh. They opposed Brett Kavanaugh.
As all reasonable people should.
Yes.
So tactically, yes, tactically, I agree with you. By the way, Tracy, in that if the Freethought Caucus was comprised entirely of atheists, then it would be less effective. And this is simply because there are just more religious people than atheist people, or non-religious people, or non-theists. Atheists, perhaps. There are just more of them. So what that means is that by having religious people within the Freethought Caucus, it is easier to make compromises and still like it looks better, right? It's an optics thing. When you say, I am for the separation of church and state, also I am religious, like it looks better. It's going to be a much harder sell if it is the atheist club. As a person who was never a theist, which seems to be quite rare, I would prefer if it was purely atheists. However, I gotta, take my wins where I can and understand the tactics.
Like, listen, man, we're holding on by the skin of our teeth right now. Like, you just gotta start aligning, because
just get on my non-existent level.
That type of thing too, where someone can say like, "Oh, I'm." This flavor of a religion, but internally they are, atheist, but they attend church. So, like technically you can be like an atheist Catholic, so there's some deniability there. I'm just saying. Do I think, but I do agree with you that we should have more representation, because Gail Jordan, who is the executive director of Republicans for Religion, Recovering from Religion, ran for a state seat in Tennessee as an open atheist in Tennessee, which is so red. And she's reported on getting positive feedback from the community. She didn't win, but getting a lot of positive feedback as being an open atheist, actually running for a government seat in her own county. So, there is a benefit to it. I think to a certain degree, because yes, we have poll numbers that say like, if, an atheist running, I will not vote for them. But if you normalize it more and you start listening to people talk about actual policy versus belief, that could shift a gear. Like, Tracy, what's your kind of feeling on that?
I agree that being open would about it and speaking openly about atheism amongst political candidates would help to normalize it and maybe cut down on a lot of the knee-jerk reactions of, oh, atheists, the people who kick puppies and burn cars. So
don't tell me what I do on my Tuesday.
Yeah, don't yuck my yum. But I don't think that necessarily just having previously I think that would be the domain of new candidates, not incumbents, to necessarily start announcing their atheism left, right, and center. But I think we could get to that point where incumbents could be doing that. However, I think it would have to start, like you were saying, with a lot of people doing it and losing, and then gradually we work our way up. It's just one of those things. What's up, Rob? I saw you point at me.
Yeah, no, I agree. You're playing tactics again. That's the thing, is that it's politics, it's games, and therefore it is tactics. You said earlier that it is their oh God, the Christians must declare their Christianity, whereas atheists aren't necessarily obligated to. I must agree, but man, I really wish I could make an argument that being like, it is dire. Now is the time where more and more people are required to openly call themselves an atheist in this time, where more and more people are being religiously prosecuted. So if there was ever a time, it's now. And tactically, I do agree with you that we should get, it would be really nice if there were more people, new people. It would have to be new people because, again, tactically, if the incumbents were to do it, then they would probably, their constituents would feel betrayed. That is not a thing I thought about, but that's an interesting point.
It's just one of those things, man. But something I wanted to bring attention to, the representative who announced the Congressional Freethought Caucus in 2018 was Representative Jared Huffman from California, and is currently the only openly humanist member of Congress right here by Hemant Mehta. I think that is the more important factor, because I think it's important that we be humanists first and atheists maybe fifth, because it's irrelevant. Of what relevance is my non-acceptance of other people's claims? It's not terribly relevant. The moral system that we aspire, that at least I think you guys as well subscribe to, being represented in Congress, I think that's a good thing. I think that's a fantastic thing that he's been there at least a couple terms now, being openly humanist. That's a fantastic sign maybe, I don't know, indicator.
Yeah, it's hard for me to remember that being an atheist does not it does not mutually include a moral system.
Oh no. No.
However, right, but like, I fail to find atheists who are not humanists. I'm sure they exist and they would be a wonder, right? But like, they don't necessarily go hand to hand. So I agree. Yeah, definitely. Humanist in the game of real life, being a humanist is more important than being an atheist. I personally just forget that those are separate things.
They're different things.
Because they just
listen,
that's what happens when you become an atheist. You care about people.
Yeah, Gamergate was a whole thing of people that were atheists and misogynist buttheads. So that was a time. So because I was online during my deconstruction at that time, and it was not a kind place to woman. So, you know, but that's the thing about, like, people are nuanced, weird. Anyway, so
I want to tell you a cool stat if I can.
Sure.
Yeah. So the House of Representatives is 215 seats, and with 28 of them being people from the Freethought Caucus, that means that this is 13%. We have 13% of people who are openly for separation of church and state. And then we behind the scenes, we're talking a lot about Dungeons and Dragons and other tabletop role-playing games. And I just want to point out that rolling a 20 on a D20 is a 5% chance. So we're like doing more than twice as good as rolling D20s.
We're so great.
Hell yeah, brother.
Hell yeah.
Stats are fun.
So,
while you were saying that, I knew what you were leading to, and so I was frantically searching my desk for dice, and they're all in the living room. So just ignore. You're going to see this video, and you're going to see me as soon as you start talking, look everywhere but at my camera, and that's what I was doing.
That is, by the way, that is the nonprofit's way. We are professionals of all time. But lower your expectations.
Professional at something, like you say.
So anyway, I'm actually going to do my job now. We have, this thing about like being non-religious as a dirty word. So on that sort of, perspective, can candidates kind of talk about, like we were talking about humanism before, like what kind of wording should they use versus like religious, talking about the moral good, in religious context. What, if you were going to run for office, I'm going to start with you, Rob. If you were going to run for office as a secular person, what kind of wording would you say to people not to look at you as an atheist, but as a humanist and actually care about the moral good and the law?
I genuinely think that's an interesting question. And the first answer is I'm not sure, mostly because I would just talk. I think a big part of it is not appealing to the religious speech, not having to end everything with God bless America. Like what would happen is not the obviousness or the pushing of religious ideology, or even just like we're all in the in crowd because we're all Christian. It would not be a pushing of anything obviously necessarily atheistic. It would just be like, hi, I mean, I'm not going to run, but like, hi, I'm Rob. I'm for people's rights. We should take care of people and make sure that when those people are taken care of, that we, help victims. And that includes both directions, like depending if, this is why I'm not a politician. But the idea is that I'm not appealing to a religious background. I'm not saying I need to be tough on crime as a dog whistle or talk about how we need to have traditional family Christian values. Like these are loaded terms as opposed to I could say something like we should respect the declaration of union of two people who marry. Because it is not necessarily, I would not then say this, not necessarily a religious thing, but it is the contract that two people enter into with each other. And that in and of itself is an excellent and wonderful thing. And we should respect both of their wishes to each other. There's nothing religious about that.
Fair. So, Tracy, same question.
I would call attention not necessarily because as I've said, I think I'm in an atheist community right now, but we don't sit around backstage and talk about how we don't like gods or whatever. We don't talk about atheism backstage. We talk about the things that matter to us, which are individual autonomy and rights, which these would be the things that I would speak to. I would speak to guaranteeing the freedoms for Americans, and also for those who are not Americans just visiting. I would point out that humanism applies to all people, regardless of any preconceived notions or creed that they've aligned with. Humanism applies to you whether you're a Christian, whether you're a Satanist, whether you're a Buddhist, it doesn't matter. I care about you to the same extent I care about everyone else, and I will always look out for your rights and what you need to live your life happily. And that would be how I go about it.
Yeah, it is a frighteningly more compassionate line of thought when one's respect of others' humanity comes from oneself rather than one's religiosity.
I agree. When you make that decision for yourself rather than having it imposed upon you, it's fantastic. But yeah.
Yeah. Well,
what would you say?
What would you say, Helen? Yeah, we're going to turn it around on you now.
Oh, God.
How do you speak to people trying to get elected?
What would I say? I would be like, I'm not going to say, listen, motherfuckers, because that would not go.
I don't know. Have you seen?
Seconds, it's fine.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like I would try to talk a little bit more eloquently than, maybe not. I don't know. I would try to appeal to people's emotions and moral centers rather than belief. I think, as you know, we keep discussing that I don't really care what you believe in. I care more about how you treat one another. Because regardless if you're an atheist or a Christian, as long as you're not a butthead, I'm not going to treat you like you're a butthead. And I think that, you know, the basic rule is like, don't be a dick. So like, if we all kind of in that same, you know, area of being kind and, you know, good to one another, that should be first. And then policy comes later. What do we, you know, what matters to us as a whole, which is basically like, you know, making sure there's food on the table, you know, we can enjoy life, you know, and if you decide to go to church, great. Or if you don't, that's okay too. Like this is not, you know, at the end of the day, are your basic needs being met? You know, is everybody equal under the law? And are we doing the best to push society forward rather than, you know, going back and saying like this group of people is better than another group of people? You know, at the end of the day, belief is just, you know, your perspective of the world and a philosophy. It says nothing about who you are as a human being. And we have to, you know, that would be more my messaging. Like what do we owe to each other and how that translates into wider society and government.
Amen. There's a cool bit in this article that I actually really wanted to point out because I thought how they word it is interesting because it says this is just a group of lawmakers dedicated to promoting reason-based public policy, blah, 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 blah. And then the author says, there's really no reason anyone should be against this. And they italicize anyone. And I think that's one, I agree with them. But that's not what I would have done. And not that the article is wrong. I think it's really interesting because, again, remember, this is a group of lawmakers dedicated to promoting reason-based policy. There is really no reason why anyone should be against this. Italicize the reason because, when it speaks back to the sentence, but we're talking about thoughts. So when people have reasons, they have reasoned. And I want people to be more thoughtful of their own belief structures. So it's not, to me, it's not the anyone-ness of this. It's we should all be aware of what's happening and we should all get on board with thinking about our own world.
Amen.
Yeah.
Tracy, final thoughts?
This is a fantastic palate cleanser, and I just hope that the caucus continues to add members.
You're here. So, after, you know, a couple other articles this week that were like, oh no, like it's good to see that, you know, wonderful people are sticking up for humanism and not all the bad things. So, you know, great. It's awesome. Keep it up. Anyway, if you want to learn more about what other wonderful secular organizations are doing, please, we do have those too. So, you know, click on some videos. Please like and subscribe. And we have merch, so you check out our merch store. So do that as well. So do the things. There's links everywhere. So.
Over there. I got one.
This way. It's great.